The Association of Anglican Clubs, in collaboration with the Anglican Diocese of Accra, hosts a one-day thought leadership dialogue series on the theme Affirmative Discourse towards the strengthening of the Church. Speakers are Reverend Professor J.H. President, Trinity Theological Seminary, Accra; Professor J.H. Kofi Bonney, PhD, Associate Professor NOGUCHI Memorial Institute for Medical Research, University of Ghana, Legon; Very Reverend Samuel Lankwe Lamte, Dean of the Cathedral Church of the Most Holy Trinity.
Good morning once again, and my name is Kofi Bonney. I'm here by the invitation from the organizers of this very noble venture invited me. I think it's a very noble venture because it's one of the things that, or one of the initiatives that I'm very young in the Anglican Church, or I'm very young in the church. I have not seen some before. Having the clergy and the laity having some interactions together. So I think they deserve an applause. They've done very well. So I'll just zoom directly to what I have to do. I am representing the laity. So myself and those of us here who we call ourselves unordained but baptized Christians. So I represent you. Right, so Mr. Chairman, we don't have a chairman here, so my Lord Bishop, I think he's gotten up. And ladies and gentlemen, brethren in the Lord, it's indeed pleasurable. In fact, I am very honored. An experience that is of great honor to me to have that opportunity to address the most distinguished audience and respected ordained and the non-ordained members of the church. I'm indeed grateful to the organizers, as I said. The theme, Affirmative Discourse towards Strengthening of the Church. And as it was said, it was derived from the diocesan theme, that's affirmative discipleship, the role of the clergy and the laity. Yes, the initiative of having a dialogue series is intended by the leadership and possibly the members of AAC to bring the clergy and the laity to not a round table, but a table of discussion about how we can effortlessly pursue the Anglican agenda. That means there's an agenda which is Anglican. So maybe we'll look at that one in later discussions. So I'm supposed to, as I said, look at the critical challenges that we have, outline the priorities, and also talk about the solutions and consider the required synergies and the infrastructural interventions that will help in achieving the goal of strengthening the church. So, what is the role of who I will call the lay faithful, the laity? The ministry of the lay persons is to represent Christ and his church. The lay people are to bear witness to him wherever we may find ourselves, and also in accordance with the gifts that we have been given, to carry out Christ's work of reconciling the world and to take their place, or take our place in life, worship, and governance of the church. So in considering what I will call the critical challenges, which is going to be the mainstay of the talk that I'm going to talk about, or the talk that I'm going to give, I will let it hinge on what I will refer to as to missions. I'll just limit myself to what we are supposed to be doing as the lay, that is mission. And how does missions relate to what we call church strengthening, or let's say church growth? Amidst the busyness, or let's say bustle, or for a better word, we say flurry of activities of all the other ministries that elbows our attention, you may discover that when missions is given a center stage, every other aspect of the church may benefit. And if you say benefit, we talk about may be strengthened. As God gives our church a passion to bring Christ to every tribe, to every tongue, to every nation, we pray that He should also give us the skill set to center stage mission in our quest to strengthen the church. We know that the church shares in Christ's mission of bringing all to the knowledge of God and of salvation. All its members are called to this intrinsic mission that has been bequeathed to the entire church. The lay faithful, that is the laity, we form the greatest number, and indeed we do so, and our functions are important in this mission. Indeed, some adequately understand the nature of our expected contribution to the missions, or let's say to what I will also refer to as what we are desiring, how we can grow the church or develop the church. But we also have to know that we have a strong desire to participate in it, but we are continually beset by numerous setbacks that constitute what we call the untold challenges for the church. As we sit here, we know very well that the church is beset with many challenges. In fact, when the Suffragan bishop was talking to us, giving his introductory remarks, he mentioned it. Nobody here can deny the fact that we don't know the challenges that the church is grappling with. You know. And we know the solutions to them. He said that we have had many talk shops. That's how we will call it. We have come up with many, we'll say, solutions. But always we have implementation issues. So for challenges, we have. But the problem is, now we are having issues how to implement the solutions that we ourselves have proffered. So we'll look at some few in the context or in the group that I represent, the laity. Let me take marriage as the first one. Marriage. Very common in our innumerable setbacks is the confirmation of St. Paul's insight. If we look at 1 Corinthians chapter 7, go further down, some from verse 33. He said, the married man is anxious about the affairs of the world, how to please his wife. And if you continue, he said, and his interests are divided. If you go to verse 34, the second part, he said, the married woman is anxious about the affairs of the world, how to please her husband. Family affairs, my dear brothers and sisters, are in the understanding, in our understanding, there are clear obstacles when it comes to what we call missions, or what we want to refer to how we can develop or expand or grow the church. Some cannot go beyond their nuclear family of spouse and children. We rather believe to having a mission within our family, and it is limited solely to this. Missionary activities in distant places are rare, and we mainly consider it as part of the vocation of the ordained, that is the priest. A core of our duties at home disrupts some of our contributions as Christians. If we consider what we look at marriage as the oldest institution of divine origin, marriage forms the family is greatly besieged by perverse ideologies. Its divine origin, its character and form, as ordained by God or the Creator, is one that has been, I would say, besieged with many problems. So one woman and one man, that is what God ordained it. If we look at Genesis chapter 2, but now we have been questioned. As humans, we have altered what we know as the same gender marriage. And now we have all sorts of things. In science, we have the natural process of procreation. That's what we know. A man and a woman coming together and having a child or having a baby coming out of it. This has been abused. So we are now attempting as humans to create, or to, let's say, we procreate through our own invented scientific ways. Because I'm a science person, we do that. Indeed, the social question has become a radically anthropological. So we are asking how we are going to do that. We are having issues with what Jesus described in Matthew chapter 19, verses 1 to 19. Jesus was talking about divorce. And this has been infringed upon by what we know in Genesis chapter 2. So the lack of sense of the sacredness of marriage affects the society in which Christians live. Families are gradually losing their status as domestic church and cradle of missionary zeal. If we do that, how can we then talk about the advancement of missions, let alone talking about what we refer to as strengthening of the church? So that is what marriage presents us. Let's look at the second part, or the second point that I have here, finances. And as we all know, finances is what we call it's a huge thing. When you talk about finances, it's like an albatross around our neck. It's weighing us down. You see, you mean that they cause great problems from which one cannot escape from. Or they prevent us from doing what we intend to do. Even the tasks as clubs that we want to do, if we don't have finances, we can do very little. It is important to know that financial resources are indeed needed in an organized work, especially when it comes to evangelism. And the dearth of these resources adversely affects the missions or the mission work. Many people in Africa barely have enough to live on. Therefore, contributing adequate resources for missions is still an unrealistic desire for many. It is common in some places in Africa to see individuals relying on external aids for survival, and it is very common in Ghana here too. There was a time we made a proclamation that we will not depend on international aid again. I don't know whether that proclamation still holds. You see, poverty, financial constraints is an issue, even when some nurture an ardent desire to participate in the church's mission. Moreover, considering the trend in the society today, where mostly the rich or the influential have the voice, if Christians are poverty-stricken, they may not be able to break or speak out on situations that require outright interjections. So if materialism is akin to the activities that we perform or towards material things, then our acquisition of these materials at all costs describes appropriately a phenomenon detected by the laity as a setback to our full participation in missions that we want to engage in, or in our idea of strengthening the church. No one wants to engage in a non-lucrative venture from which they will gain nothing. A desire for material things has nothing in common with the propagation of the Christian faith, whose aim is highly altruistic. And therefore, it is not this world of material gains that we can talk about missions for us as laity. If we don't have the means, it becomes very difficult for us to start talking about church strengthening or talk about evangelism, which mainly translates in that. Materialistic tendency obstructs the mission and is contrary to the evangelical poverty in imitation of Christ, who became poor so that we might be rich. That is in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9. Then we can also talk about formal education. A lack of formal education, that is inability to read and write, certainly would debar many a lay person from having the will and being available for missions in the church, and by so doing accomplishing their desires that they've set for themselves. There is a limit to which illiteracy can do, and all of us here can attest to that there is a limit to which illiteracy can do, in spite of the goodwill, piety, or generosity of the individual. Interaction with some classes of individuals in the society becomes impossible if you cannot speak or write well. That is illiteracy. This situation results in the lack of facilitators of faith, sharing good witnesses in the community. So illiteracy is a problem, and there's a limit to which we can use that one in growing our church or talking about church strengthening. Many are not adequately instructed in the faith, and its repercussions are almost palpable, particularly in what we refer to as the neo-pagan trend manifested in various forms. The vacuum generated by inadequate instructions in the faith or lack of knowledge of Christian teaching is unrestrainably filled with practices of traditional religion, which are in consonance with Christian belief. One of who is not conversant with Christian faith cannot be its herald. That is, nobody who is conversant, or nobody can herald Christian faith if he's not conversant with it. For we need knowledge and truth, because without these two, we cannot stand firm. We cannot even move forward if we are talking about illiteracy. For the laity to participate in their mission of enlivening the world, they need adequate catechesis. Without this, they cannot courageously face the challenges they encounter from others, answer the questions that they are put to them, and also be a light to themselves, let alone to others. So this dovetails into looking at closely related the fact that discuss the lack of adequate formation of laity towards mission work that is adequately preparing or forming laity to do the work that we call church strengthening or church growth. If one is not very conversant with Christian faith, or even cannot read and write, then how do you prepare the person very well for the church work? Many of them want to be involved in various aspects of the church's mission, but there's no program for this where they live and can live their faith or can practice their faith in daily lives and make contributions for the mission work. They believe that if they are instructed and co-opted, they can move beyond their immediate environment in proclaiming their faith. We also have an issue of cultural practices. Some cultural practices in Africa, they are incongruous with Christian faith. And these, we talk about Christian orthodoxy and also orthopraxy. That is, orthodoxy being correct conduct, both ethical and liturgical, and which is in constant contrast with orthodoxy, which is emphasizing correct beliefs. Some of these practices from the laity, talking about African practices from the laity, are what we call the non-masses, and they are revival of forgotten superstitions that have untold influence on laity who, because of inadequate instructions on the faith, have not yet extricated themselves from them. So living a Christian life with the identity crisis breeds what we call syncretism, a form of infidelity, and adherents of this mixture cannot be propagating any of the two tasks that has been put to us, that is either being in missions or trying to grow the church. We have an issue also with other people who profess to be Christians. You see, Paul said that Paul, who experienced both internal and external oppositions in his mission. That is in 2 Corinthians chapter 11. And in fulfillment of Jesus' words, that internal division is inevitable, said that some lay faithful are hindered by other fellow Christians, or fellow Christians in quotes. Professed Christians who lack the zeal sometimes obstruct others, that is non-Christians, and they perceive these efforts as being the laity who are being very zealous or as overstepping their boundaries. It entails courage and fortitude to live and proclaim one's faith in a subtle hostile environment. It is more challenging to be a Christian in a predominantly non-Christian environment, where religious freedom is not officially forbidden, but where there is silent persecution in practice. Official state documents sometimes remain tacit when it comes to issues with religion, especially when someone has a faith that contradicts the faith of others where he or she lives. You see, Muslims in some part of the society, if you are living in a place where Muslims are, sometimes you have official documents that will remain quiet about the way you practice or the way you openly profess their beliefs. And you get intimidated in many ways. And the society, sometimes to the larger extent, the community leaders will purport to be concerned about what is happening. But nothing sometimes is done about that. So when there is oppression or determined plan to religions to suppress and malign the Christians, they find it difficult to fully participate in missions. So that means if you find yourself in an area where you get intimidated by other religious groups, then it becomes very difficult for you as a lay person to practice your religion. Sometimes you don't even get the help from the community leaders as you want it, so that you can engage in activities that will help you to strengthen either your faith or help the church in its growth. The increasing use of information and communication technology, that's ICT, also facilitates communication, particularly in evangelism, and it renders the world a global village where many obtain the same information at the same time. Some contents can be beneficial when they are geared towards a vision of a person and the common good that reflect truly universal values and tenets. Other conversely erode individual cultural values and lead to self-alienation. Christianity, which has fertile terrains in many parts of Africa, is greatly diluted because of the influence of other cultures conveyed through what we call the ITC. This has adverse impact on orthodoxy as well as orthopraxy of faith in a culture that could have naturally enhanced its faith. Affected laypersons have very little to offer for the mission because they have no natural basis offered by other cultural values. So some laypersons can persevere in their faith when faced with scandals of church leaders. Unfortunately, others are discouraged. They grow lukewarm to the extent of suffering loss in their faith. So participating in the mission of the church in the midst of clerical scandals poses tremendous challenge to the laity. That means where we have scandals even within the church, which probably may be mediated by the leaders of the church or the religious bodies, sometimes it becomes very intimidating. And it does not help with the laity in forging ahead with the mission story or the mission work that has been or that they want to engage in. Many victims of such abuses have left the church and are discouraged by others with their stories and attitudes towards its mission, let alone strengthening of the church. We can also look at evangelistic apathy. This too often looks or starts at the top. A church that has lost its fire for evangelism usually settles into what we call maintenance mode, or they will become stagnant or no growth, stunted growth. We have turf wars. It's tough to reach outside of the church when everybody is fighting to keep his power inside the church. Plus, non-believers aren't interested in stepping into a ground that they will see as battleground. Then, the most important of all is prayerlessness. There is no way we can have church strengthening if we relegate prayer to the background. So it may sound a bit super spiritual, but I am not shocked by the correlation between churches that do not pray and the churches that do not grow much. Then our first speaker spoke about discipleship. Poor discipleship is also another way that we have to look at if we are looking at laity, the work that we are supposed to be doing. When baby believers remain babies, after many years of being believers, they tend to become whiners. They have a whining attitude or strategy to help other babies to grow. They don't grow at all, so they will also prevent others from growing. Then we talk about ministry, or we talk retreat ministry. We always do retreat. We have a retreat mentality. said for many years that the church has become a place to retreat from the battles rather than a place to get rearmed for the war ahead. The church in retreat will not grow, or the church in retreat will not be able to engage effectively in the mission field. For that matter, will not be able to engage in what we call the expansion or growth. So with these issues, we look at some few solutions that put together. Some of the churches, or let's say the dioceses, are engaged in doctrinal and theological formations of the laity with organized formation programs. We have theological schools, we have courses that award certificates and diplomas in theology. And I know that we are doing very well in that. I mean, if you talk about the Anglican Church, was it not too long ago we had attended a program at the cathedral where they've trained the Sunday school teachers and lay readers, and also I think some music people who are engaged, who are into music, the music directors. So we do that a lot, and which is a very commendable thing that we do. But the question then becomes, after these people have been trained and awarded these certificates, do they stick to the TORs that they give? Do they stick to the terms of reference that they give? And who supervises them? Is this something that we do often? Don't do it. So the efforts should be intensified, even though we are doing that, with orientation on mission that is duly incorporated in these programs. And the idea is to equip the laity for the church's mission. Then we can also look at the early missionaries who achieved so much through formal education of the laity. The church in Africa must not relent in its effort to collaborate with states in offering formal education to all, not only to selected few. It is laudable where some parishes organize adult education in their parochial schools, or let's say schools that they have formed. This is highly recommendable and can make use of volunteers who, for some reason, will have the affordability of education for those with limited resources. The church has also always cared for families. That one we know that since the church began, recognizing them as indispensable organs of evangelism. Parishes and let's say dioceses and other religious institutions should bring the documents of church on families to the grassroots level. These should be essential materials for ongoing formation, which must be taken seriously by all competent authorities. We can also talk about parish and pastoral councils. They should incorporate the laity and involve them in their decision making. We shouldn't intimidate them when we go for PCC meetings. Sometimes the way we speak to some of the members who are not ordained, it leaves much to be desired. So we should look at that. We should rather try to incorporate, to involve them in decision making. This should be encouraged in places where it does not currently exist. Knowing the laity's essential roles in the mission of the church, religious leaders ought to bring them closer with respect and concern for their welfare. So respect begets respect. So if we respect them, they will respect us. And the friction that sometimes exists between the laity and the clergy would either be minimized or will not be there at all. In places where there is commitment to interreligious dialogue, peace thrives and healthy coexistence is facilitated. So this fosters freedom to practice one's religion in collaborative effort with other Christians in inculcating Christian values in the society. So leaders should make it their priority to carry the laity along in the course of inter-religious dialogue. The lay faithful, that is the laity, believe and propose assiduous prayers for missionary zeal. These are highly needed in our time that is pervaded by materialism, individualism, and what we call the selfishness, which are incompatible with Christian tenets and missionary spirit. I'll be concluding very soon. More and ever, the formation of youth is so much required in our time, mainly where youth no longer give the hope of being the future of the society and the church. No, the clarion call for the clubs is that they need to get more youth infused in them because they have an aging population. So it's true. So what are we doing as leadership to make sure that our programs, our activities are attractive to the youth? It is by so doing that we'll get the youth and people like us joining. Yes. So, in conclusion, we have to be conscious of the varieties of the charisms that unite our common source, that is the Holy Spirit. That one, we have no dispute about that. And these form a glaring beautiful mosaic edifying the body of Christ. The church is ever concerned about all its members who bear the divine gifts. The church's dynamic feature is always inspired and guided by the same Spirit that helps us to grow steadily in its understanding of each person's dignity and vocation. This explains the church's many endeavors in the form of teaching, in the several synods that we attend, and the publications on various aspects of its life and mission. The church progresses in its knowledge of the mission that has been bequeathed to us by Christ in sharing his own mission and redemption for its existence, and coincides with the mission of the church and what the laity engages to do. The lay members enjoy the church's loving concern for all her children, for she constantly plans on how to carry everyone along and helps them to realize their vocations and fructify our individual gifts. Through the effort of the church, the lay faithful have something to appreciate. They appreciate their dignity and vocation. We share in various ways according to our understanding and our capacities in this mission. Through them, the church, or through us, the church is able to permeate all sectors of human life because we live and work in places which only we can adequately evangelize. Being aware of our indispensable role in bringing the gospel to the ends of the earth, the church should nurture us all. Indeed, should make sure that we don't differentiate or we don't show any biases when it comes to nurturing. Paying particular attention to the cradle and human family, where all should first receive the fundamental instructions on the common vocation of Christian. So in the end, our various gifts and life conditions are the hindrances in giving themselves unreservedly to the work of evangelism, particularly in reaching out to persons and societies far from their vicinities. Natural family engagement, lack of adequate preparations, expected support from leaders, poverty manifesting in varied ways, and perverting effects of globalization that lead to self-alienation are some of the many challenges that stare us in the face. That's the laity. The church can assist by intensifying its material roles of encouraging, of equipping spiritually and morally and physically so as to accomplish its mission through all its members. May the Lord help us all. Thank you for your attention.